We got another big green machine here. This is another one of our milling tools that we use to cut big pieces of wood down to smaller pieces of wood. Now we just went over the double bevel sliding compound miter saw, and that's a cross-cutting tool that'll cut anything up to 12 inches wide. If we have anything wider than 12 inches, and actually up to 26 inches wide that we need to cross-cut, we're going to use the radial arm saw. And in this shop, that's the only thing we use the radial arm saw, is cross-cutting. We don't do anything else with it, although it's capable of doing some other operations. It's quite dangerous to use it that way. So if I had a piece of stock that was only 4 or 5 inches wide, there wouldn't be any reason for me to come over to the radial arm saw and make a cross-cut. I can always go to the chop saw or the double bevel sliding compound miter saw. So there's no need for me to be cutting this material here. Where the radial arm saw comes in handy for cross-cutting is when we want to cut wider stock down to size. I've got a piece of plywood here that's already been ripped down its middle from 4 feet wide to 2 feet wide. Now I want to get some shorter pieces out of the 2 foot wide stock. This could be up to 26 inches. We've got 24 here, but we could make 26 if we had to. Just like with most of the other power tools, we have a table and a fence. And whenever we're cutting stock, we always want to make sure we have the stock down against the table and up against the fence. The double bevel sliding compound miter saw, in order to use the tool, we had to draw the head out first before we turn the tool on and push through the stock. On the radial arm saw, we have a counterweighted head so that when we draw the saw through the material, it doesn't want to kick out at us real fast. We do have to watch out that there's no obstacles in the way of the saw blade when we turn it on, otherwise it'll crawl up over that material and it might come shooting out at us. We know there's a line of fire with this tool too, or a line of cut, as evidenced by the saw kerfs in the table. We want to keep our hands at least 6 inches away from that saw kerf when we're making this cut. Now this tool here generates 16 horsepower when we fire it up. It's got a 16-inch blade on it, and the momentum of that blade when it gets going is pretty fast. And you'll see how long it takes this saw to wind down after we turn it off. So just like with any other workpiece, we need to know how big we want to cut it. So we've got our tape measure and our pencil. Now with the chop saw, we were measuring and marking out at this edge. If we want to line the cut up with the blade, we want to mark the inner edge of the board for this particular operation. Okay, so say I want 80 inches out of this piece. I mark my cut, and I might indicate which side of the pencil line I want to cut to. So I make a little mark on that side of the pencil line. Otherwise, I could come out short by the width of the kerf of the saw blade. In other words, the amount of material the saw blade takes out is about 1/8 of an inch, and you always have to be aware of that. So I've got my mark. Now on this bigger tool, it generates a lot of horsepower, so you want to make sure that the area around the floor is clear in case you have to step back. You don't want to be tripping and falling over backwards. Okay, we've got nice long support rollers on either side so we can cut some pretty long stock to length. We've got an 8-foot sheet here and I'm well supported. I don't have to worry about supporting it after I cut it off. I want to line the blade up with my cut before I take the cut. Get down and eyeball it. And I can cut a little wide of the line if I want to make sure I'm cutting a nice square line before I take my final cut. Again, I want my hand at least 6 inches away from the line of fire. I don't want the blade touching the material when I turn it on, or it could crawl up the material at me. So I push it back behind the fence. I'm going to open this dust collector so the sawdust will shoot up the chute. Make sure I'm lined up. Reach down and turn the saw on. And draw it through the work in a smooth motion. Okay, now you notice after I completed the cut, I pulled my workpiece away from the blade, put the blade back behind the fence, and to get the off-fall, or the piece that came off, out of the way, I didn't reach down with my fingers and push it out of the way because that put my fingers in the line of cut. I used my workpiece, which is much less valuable than my fingers, to push that off-fall out of the way. And then I can reach over and get the off-fall out of the way. Okay? Now you can hear the saw still winding down. That beast has a lot of momentum.